Good morning, Judith.
Good morning, Sonya.
Welcome to the Coach's Cup podcast. I am Sonya Green from Sonya Green Coaching.
And I'm Judith Fender. I coach exclusively for the No BS weight loss program.
Okay, we're going to have to stop because I don't think your mic is working.
What?
I couldn't tell a difference in that. And this week we are talking about, in fact, I really can't believe we haven't talked about this yet. Mm-hmm. We're talking about imposter syndrome, which is, I coach women on imposter syndrome. I've been coaching women on imposter syndrome for 2 years now?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we are finally having that as our topic. But before we do, we have our last 2 Coach's Cup mugs to give away.
Sonya, I have to tell you, I didn't think I would enjoy having my face on a coffee cup as much as I do. I was resistant. I thought,
you were resistant.
I was, but I have enjoyed it. If y'all are watching us on the YouTube, it's been quite fun. Anyway, so who are the lucky? No, they're not lucky. They have earned these. Let's just theme this right into how. Well, there is some luck, but they did have to put some effort in.
They did have to
leave us a review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have 2. And ladies, we thank you, or I assume you're all ladies. I know most of the people that I have talked to who have sent me your address to mail these out to are women. But we appreciate the effort you have made. When we started, we have more than doubled our reviews. So
we have, and it's nice to hear from our listeners, and that the value that they're getting, and it helps put a little gas in the tank, makes it exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because podcasting, it's kind of we enjoy it because sometimes it's our only chance during the week to have a conversation other than a quick text back and forth.
Right. Self-development, like self-coaching, like what we're doing right here is like rolling out, right?
Oh yeah. But it's nice to know that it does, it does move outward and affect other people, and that they appreciate what we're doing. So, but anyway, we have 2 winners. The first one is Annie.21. Annie.21. And the second one is, I'm just going to put all these letters together. AGPRMP. AGPRMP.
MP. Uh-huh. Do we get to read out what they said? Like what they say?
I think that our listeners should go and read the reviews and then add one of their own.
Oh, there you go. Yes. Fill the cup, right?
That's right. Fill the cup.
The proverbial cup.
But if you 2 will email me at Sonya, SONYA, at SonyaGreenCoaching.com, then I will send you, and you'll have to email me your address, and I will send you your mug.
There you go. That's how you do it.
That's how you do it. And this is going to hit, we're dropping this one Thanksgiving week. So we may be digging around and finding we have a few extra, but we'll let you know next week if that's the case. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Imposter syndrome.
All right. So, down the Google portals, we've got our definition, and right off the bat, this definition, we'll just roll with it. So it's a psychological pattern. It's not a psychological diagnosis. I want to be sure we say that. It's a pattern of negative thinking where an individual doubts their accomplishments and persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud.
Yes.
And the data initially went on to suggest that it's most common in college and grad school students and people who are facing new and challenging jobs.
Yeah. I know I've told my story of how I discovered I had imposter syndrome before on this podcast. So, but it has been studied since the 1970s. Yep. And most will agree, even though we are discovering that it's more prominent across the culture. Generally, women and minorities are more likely to deal with this. And you're right, it's not a diagnosis, but simply the fact that we call it a syndrome.
Right.
You know, people are like, oh, this is serious.
Yeah, it's heavy.
I have a syndrome.
Right. So to your point, that was Pauline Clance that coined this intent, this imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And it went on to say that 70% of people will experience this at least once in their life. And
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just funny because when I first told you 2 years ago that I was going to coach women with imposter syndrome, you were like, huh, what is, and then how many times since then have you said, I think I might have imposter syndrome?
Well, you know, as this unfolds out in real time, you know, that's why these podcasts that we do are not happenstance. They are very purposeful and directional, self-coaching, self-exploration, self-development, 100%. Yes, I have a tendency I have experienced imposter syndrome and all of its branches for the last year and a half.
Well, and you know, when I was first starting my coaching, I've done a few workshops and things like that on imposter syndrome. I haven't done any in the last year. But as I move into retirement from teaching, I'm going to get back into doing more of those. But one of the things that I see over and over again when I talk to women about this is them saying, the awareness, just simply having the awareness that this thing exists is so helpful. And I understand that because that's where I was. I thought I was the only person. I thought I was the only person who felt like a fraud, who was waiting to be exposed.
That reminds me how many times Corinne, you know, in the membership, we call it, she calls it, you're not the only unicorn. You're not the only unicorn. But I had, on a similar note, as I was doing this research, if you will, realizing that it seemed like so much of the antidote is just having people to communicate with and like sharing your experiences with others, that you are not alone in what you are going through. And so I even thought to myself, I'm like, can I talk about my imposter syndrome on this podcast? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, you should. Well, and it's because it's the feelings that are drummed up as we're going through it are all of those feelings that we're afraid to share, like shame and anxiety and crippling fear. I mean, it's real.
And self-doubt, like the root of that self-doubt.
Yeah. So are you going to share something?
Oh, wait a minute. I was telling Sonya pre-gaming, y'all, I have like 7 pages front and back of notes that I have taken on all of this. So forgive me. I'm like looking down and flipping pages, and I'm not sure where are we going to start on this, Sonya?
Well, we have explained to them what it is.
What it is. Why is it a problem?
Yeah. Why is it a problem? Go ahead.
Well, because it shows up in your work, in your space of life, in you're not validating yourself, you're not internalizing your success, and you're constantly looking outward at others' successes, comparing yourself, going down that, shitty diaper, if you will, sorry. And it limits you from enjoying your successes and living your best life, and limits you from getting ahead.
Yes. Yes. That's the big thing. And so many times, I've talked to people who they do the things because this is high functioning, high achieving people are the ones who deal with imposter syndrome.
Right.
But it holds us back. If we allow it to, it holds us back from being even more high achieving than we have the potential to be. That's the thing to remember. It's
Right.
not, but I've had so many people tell me, I got the degree, I got the certificate, I got whatever it was I needed to get my dream job or, whatever. But then I couldn't take that final step because I was afraid I would get in a situation and everybody would say, ha, loser, you're just a
Fraud.
fraud. What are you doing here? I mean, it's real.
It is.
Real fear.
I literally said to Coach Kathy at one time, I was like, I am just so, I didn't say disappointed, but I feel like I have sold you guys, what's it called? A
Bill of goods.
Yeah, a bad bill of goods or whatever. Like, you did not get what you bargained for with me. That's how into my story I was, because I'm just, and I have experienced several times of having that line of thinking and being able to work on my thoughts, reframe my thinking. And when I concentrate on the value that I do bring and my unique skills and focusing on just the simplest, smallest things, and what a shift it creates in productivity and how I show up and how much I enjoy my work. Because I love my job, right? Yeah. I love my job.
Yeah. And you were talking about the Cherokee proverb that we've talked about before, about this being a lot about the wolf that you feed. Exactly. You have these two wolves in us, and it's the one we feed that moves forward.
Right. And so much of that is, when we're feeding the wolf with our inner critic, right? The judgmental tendencies, that not good enough.
Fraud. Here's another one that I've heard you use a lot. I'm going to out you.
Yeah. Quote me.
It was just luck. It's just because I'm a nice person.
God. That kind of quoting.
How many times? It's just because I'm a nice person, and I do the same thing. It's just because people like me. I come across as a likable person. I come across, it's nothing real. It's not real talent that I have.
Yeah. It's on video, one of the camp videos when the four coaches were on the stage and Corinne's interviewing, and something came up, and I'm like, basically I said right there in front of her, and not even really knowing at that moment that's what I was experiencing. I was like, well, I think I got hired because you liked me. To her. And it's Corinne.
We sell ourselves so short. But it's the wolf that we're feeding in that point. We can find evidence for either one, but there's safety in blaming it on being likable or, being a fraud. And that sounds contradictive.
Yeah, I wanted to put a pin in that. I love to say that when I'm coaching with my private clients. I'm like, okay, let's put a pin in this. Let's put a little tack. Let's put a pretty pin, and let's stop right here. Because what we're talking about, in essence, when we talk about the ego, or the lower wolf, or the inner child, right? It's that safety is the emotional experience that these feelings are natural indicators. If we didn't have a conscious brain, our natural indicators to take care of yourself, protect yourself.
Yes.
And so our authority, our capacity to tap into the cognitive thinking and learning to override the emotions,
yes,
that when we master the emotional body that we have with our cognitive brain and see that it's coming from our line of thinking, it's some bullshit trying to protect ourselves, and that reframe and finding our value. Like, again, and I even said to Sonya, again, like we were Marco Poloing this morning, and I am profoundly blown away every time we do a podcast and the researching, and I'll go down and I'm like, oh my God, this just comes down to the model. Like, everything comes back to the model and being in integrity with yourself, and the simplicity of the model cannot be underrated, as we have all these definitions, which I love to hear. I love to know. Because it helps me put the story together. My husband's coming home. I got to shut the door. You're going to hear a dog bark. Okay. Back.
Yeah, it's that sense of, you can't underscore how important it is to be in integrity with yourself.
You know, I just, again, I'm like, it just needs even another pause right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just asking yourself with the line of thinking, am I thinking positively or negatively about myself? How can I think differently right now?
Because
What's going
we
on?
can churn in that stuff. I mean, that's
Oh,
part of the safety mechanism. If I
mhm.
sit and churn in all of these emotions, I'm not putting myself out there.
Yep.
I'm not being rejected. I'm just thinking about being the possibility. It's not a reality. And so our brain, our lower brain, makes some sense of that. That if we pull our prefrontal out and start logically taking this apart, it's not in any way logical, but it feels safe to make ourselves miserable.
Right, right. I found something in there. I just totally wanted to roll off that, but maybe you'll cut this part out where I'm flipping pages. Was talking about basically that self-coaching makes room for the higher self. That
Yes.
when we engage in these questions where we check in and which wolf am I feeding? Is this my lower ego? How can I connect with myself? How can I make decisions that align with my values? That line of self-coaching gets the prefrontal cortex engaged and helps get us out of that emotional state.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a lot of times people want to know, and I think from, especially if they're coming from a therapy model rather than a coaching model, they're like, well, what caused this? What caused this in my
Yes.
life? And while, I mean, I do think, and I used to talk a whole lot more about what causes it. Ultimately, it's our culture. It's a cultural thing. It's usually something about the way we've been raised, or about our own familial or childhood experiences. But so many people, what was 70%? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So many people deal with it that I'm not sure that it's really important to go back and try to figure out what caused it.
I
The
agree.
important thing is that we move forward with how we're going to solve it.
And how much time, because we could spend a lot of time going
Oh,
back.
sure. I can tell you my story, that I have.
And that is one of the solves
Mm-hmm.
for imposter syndrome is rewriting of the past, going back and retelling the
Sure.
story, reframing and
Yes.
looking. So
Yes.
just knowing we're not discounting that,
No.
but how much time, and hopefully, right, as Corinne says, that's the Jenga block. Maybe, if you do go back and rewrite and that pulls that one Jenga and the tower falls down and you see that it is just the stories you tell yourself
Mm-hmm.
about it. But where was I going with this? I was on a roll.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's whatever the story is, we can change it in real time.
In real time. That's for sure. Mhm.
Yeah. And when we decide to do that, when we decide to get back in integrity with our values, then and start being honest with ourselves, then we can move forward. And we know that we may experience some bad emotions. We may get to experience rejection, or we may get to experience disappointment, but at least we're being in integrity with ourselves. We're giving it our best effort.
Yeah. I'm just taking a deep breath on that one, just thinking about taking a minute, wanting to bring some value again to this podcast about my own personal experiences with it. And I'm thinking of, again, going back to the research where it was talking about like the bronze medalist, right? So like in the
Yes, I love that story.
yeah. So you have the bronze medalist is the happiest one, right? It's the silver medalist that is the least happy. because the silver medalist is doing what's called in the comparison trap with called counterfactual thinking and looking up in going, oh, I could have won the gold. I could have won the gold. And it's the bronze medalist that looks down and says, woo, at least I won a medal.
I'm on the platform.
I'm on the platform. I'm like, oh, how many times, I find myself going down that route of, looking upward and admiring others and wanting to be like them. And when I achieve this, and I'm like, it really is knocking me off any type of pedestal. When I say me, I'm talking about us as we experience, as we're going through challenges, when we're diverting our energy, looking away, again, being out of integrity by looking at others, whether we're looking up or down, we're discounting the value we're bringing in the very moment that we're in.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it's important to think about this, that imposter syndrome always makes us think that the others are working harder or the others are smarter.
Oh, smarter.
You were talking about that comparison, and it goes both ways. They could be smarter, they could be working harder, they could be prettier. I don't know. It depends on how you want to compare what it is.
Based on math, they're probably having the same thoughts as we are. 70%.
They're just managing their minds, right? Yeah. They're managing their minds better than you.
Yeah.
So how are we going to solve for this? How are we going to solve for imposter syndrome, Judith?
I have core self-evaluations. So number one is self-esteem, right? Looking into self-esteem is looking into responding more positively to yourself versus negatively. Like that's as simple as I can put it, like having those core traits of seeing yourself favorably versus not favorably.
Yeah. And to put that in the model, what is the thought that you are thinking? What is the thought that's keeping you from going after a goal that you have? Is it, I don't know enough, I'm not good enough, not smart enough? It's usually, I'm not something enough. What is that thought? And then what's the thought that you want to believe? We talk about ladder thoughts with the model. And so having a goal of what you want to believe, but taking those incremental steps along the way to increase your belief.
Right.
To feed the wolf.
Right. So that's like self-efficacy, like seeing the believing that you can do so.
Yeah. Because you have evidence for either one.
Right.
Which one are you going to draw on?
Right. And it's also looking from, and I want to use these words because it all comes back to the language. You're going to hear the message everywhere. And it's called internal or external locus of control. It's focusing on what the internal locus of control. What do you have control over? You'll hear us coaches talk about that all the time. Let's focus on what we can control, our thoughts and our feelings, what we put on our plan, thoughts we're going to think. I mean, it's so simple, yet we're so human.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with all of the external circumstances out there.
Right.
That locus of control, it's internal. I mean, the integrity, internal. Everything else is going to be what it's going to be. But I am choosing to show up. I am choosing to feed the good wolf.
The good wolf. And it's the ability to have emotional stability, or it was called low neuroticism. I thought that was funny. Navigating your emotionals, name it to tame it.
Yes.
Learn the power. Yeah. Learn the power of language equals your experience. The way you speak about it and your understanding of your experience is everything.
Yeah. When I was in graduate school and the associate dean mentioned imposter syndrome, I had never told anybody that I felt that way because my shame was so, so heavy. Oh, I just wish I was smarter. I wish I knew as much as they did. I'm so ashamed that I got here accidentally. I hope they don't figure it out. And as soon as she said she suffers from imposter syndrome and all the people around her were shaking their head, I was like,
What?
it has a name and other people have it. And I could let go of that emotion, that shame, all of the things that went with it. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't fall into the ravine again later on. But at that point, I knew that I was in it and I knew how to get out. So recognizing you always are in it with 70% of the population.
And I love that. And so many times I tell my clients when they're going through something, I love it when I can appreciate the humanity of an experience that I'm having. There is nothing unique that I am feeling that every human on this earth hasn't felt. And in particularly, I noticed this when I was pregnant with my first child, because I thought, well, if all these other women can survive through it, I can too.
Yeah.
So it's just that knowing that this is not unique. What I'm experiencing is just a bunch of chemicals coursing through my veins, and I am going to I'm going to have low neurotic. I'm going to master my emotional stability and have low neuroticism. I'm going to master my anxiety.
Well, we haven't brought up the P word yet, but perfectionism and imposter syndrome. I love the way you said it this morning when we were pre-gaming. Do you remember what you said?
They're in bed together.
That's right.
They sleep together every day.
And so if you have perfectionistic tendencies, and we talked about this just a couple of weeks ago, then
last week. Oh, yeah, a couple weeks ago. You're right.
Yeah, from when it drops. But if you deal with perfectionism, I will almost guarantee that you have imposter syndrome as well.
At a certain level. I came across, to your point, there are 5 types of imposter syndrome. And I think, again, offering these air quote labels are helpful. And maybe you identify the actions, because that's what I got. And with these labels, I identified with the actions that these labels do. So the perfectionist, never satisfied, doesn't focus on their strengths, fixates on flaws, and feels inadequate. Superhero feels inadequate, falls short, drops into shame, and starts shoulding on himself. I should be able to do more. I should be able to juggle more things. I should be more competent. The expert, which I thought this was interesting, because as I'm cramming for this podcast, because I want to know more, I want to know all the things. The expert wants to learn more. What and how much they know, even minor lack of knowledge, evokes shame.
Yes.
The natural genius has lofty goals and sets all these lofty goals and feels like a failure when they don't achieve these goals. The soloist prefers to work alone, rejects all help. And I have found myself, even on my new career this past year, I didn't even know I needed to ask for help, because I'm just like, didn't even know how.
That's one. I mean, I connect with all of these at certain levels, but even when I was finishing my bachelor's degree and deciding to go on for a master's degree, I help my students. It's one of my favorite things that I do is working with them, advising them how to move on. When I went on for my master's degree, it never occurred to me to talk to my professors about how to do it. I assumed that everybody else knew how to do it, and I just hadn't figured it out yet. And so I figured it out, and obviously it's worked out fine for me. But if I had asked for help, if I had understood that it was natural to ask for help, how much would that have changed my journey?
The suffering, it's all optional. It's all optional. I'm going to tell you what I heard in this too. The soloist, and because they see it as a sign of weakness and rejecting all help, I see it as a version of the, there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn response.
Yes.
Like this is kind of like the freeze, right? You're just kind of like, you don't know what to do. The paralysis of, maybe even some overwhelm dropped into there, which was my last week anyway. I agree. Asking for help, just knowing that you can even ask for it. It's next.
Yeah, I know. It's just kind of mind blowing how we fall into these things. But if you're falling into these, if you're dealing with any of those on that list or all of them, I think we slide in and out, like you mentioned. It's not, imposter syndrome isn't something that we wear all the time. It might be if we get in a dark place and we don't manage our mind, but for the most part, we're always kind of sliding in and out, and it's varying levels of imposter syndrome that we're dealing with depending on the level of the risk we're taking.
All right. Or what's the word I want to use? Is it implied risk?
Yeah.
The interpreted risk of a situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it doesn't have to be necessarily something like going after a master's degree.
No.
It could be as simple as, help me out, Sonya. What's a simple risk? It's, driving on I have a client driving on the highway, like a 6-lane highway.
Yeah.
Terrifying, the risk.
Yeah.
But that's another beast, but similar path.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it doesn't really matter what the end goal is. It's what we make it.
Right.
So,
and it's that narrative.
Yes. Because what's going to be simple to me is going to be complicated to you, and vice versa, just because of our experiences. Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to tell this, narrative because I had seen in my notes here about, we talk about constructing our reality every day, and back to the story we tell ourselves, suffering leading to growth versus the narrative identity is where people who believe their life is meaningful and the stories they tell themselves equal the growth, the redemptive story. Like how many people have we known that are telling that story that is not propelling them forward? It's the stuck in the past. That telling it's the contamination story of how difficult and tragic their lives are.
Yeah.
What story?
Go ahead.
No, like what story are you telling yourself?
Yeah.
What story? Be mindful of what's going on in your brain.
And I think there's just a lot of value in deciding. I mean, it does help to pull ourselves out to look for positive evidence, and we can always find positive evidence. But at some point, we have to be willing to drop the whole need for evidence and have a goal and understand that we may encounter some things we've never encountered before between here and the goal, and we just have to keep working at it.
Right.
I don't need evidence. I need that thing, whatever that is.
Is this when we fixate on the gap and feel inadequate, we get to hit refresh, and edit. I love that. Let me tell you, I love the idea of having an editor. I have been saying this my whole life. Like I always feel like I need an editor in my writing because clearly I don't find my mistakes. And that makes me think of a coach. Like that's what a coach is. I consider myself like an editor to my clients' thinking. Yeah. Because I can hear the edits that will help move your life, move your thinking in a direction you want to go. So I love the idea, having an editor and hitting refresh for yourself.
And that's what we do. I mean, it's impossible to even count how many times in coaching a client, I stop them and I'm like, did you hear what you just said?
Yes. But they
don't hear what they just said.
No.
When I repeat it back to them, they're like, what? So yeah, I love that. Having a mentor, if you can't find a coach, or if you, there's no excuse to not finding a coach because we're both coaches.
Hello.
But if you can't, if you're at a place in your life where you can't afford a coach, you can't, for whatever reason, have a coach, find a mentor at the very least, somebody who has a similar path to yours, somebody who's at a place where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some vulnerability, folks. Vulnerability is the path to integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them. I'm scared. I feel like I'm not good enough. Can you tell me about your path?
Right. And tapping into that purpose, as you were saying that, I'm reminded, even like thinking of us personally, like the value we want to add, doing these podcasts and trying to help others who can't afford or who are looking for enlightenment, that it helps us when we do this work for ourselves, provide value out into the universe to help others. That purpose driven experience helps get rid of imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah,
it's because
absolutely.
lean into the purpose, the bullshit falls away.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Anything else that you want to say about imposter syndrome? The one other thing that I would say is, in order to develop your awareness, is just really listen to yourself, listen to that self-talk, and journal. I cannot enforce, I cannot reinforce enough the power of getting that stuff out of your brain onto a page.
And I'm going to take it one step further, as finding your editor. If you are journaling and doing the things and you're still not finding the path to creating better thinking, get an editor, get a coach. Again, like to Sonya's point, a mentor, someone to share your thinking with. And
and invest in it. I mean, I don't mean invest money in it. I mean, invest yourself in it, because it doesn't help. We can coach people all day, but if they aren't doing the work to back up, to reinforce what we're giving them, it's just going to fall by the wayside.
I just saw my notes where I had taken, where it was in the part where, basically about which wolf are you going to feed, right? So there's the one, the ego is me, I. And I was thinking, of course, think about, the song, I want to talk about me. Oh, Toby Keith. I want to talk about me, want to talk about I want to talk about number one, me, my, oh my. That's the ego. So there's your song drop.
There you go.
For this.
I personally am more of a Bee Gees kind of gal, but I do get that reference because I know my husband listens to country music. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm not the country music gal.
No, I don't know that I did know that. I think because
we talk about that all the time. Just not my thing, but that's okay.
That's true, because you didn't get Kenny G or not Kenny G, Kenny Chesney reference last week.
Kenny G and Kenny Chesney. I know enough to know how very different.
Very different. I love them both.
In different ways.
Right. Kenny G was my 90s. Oh my gosh. I am bunny trailing it. I have been watching like Doogie Howser from the 90s. I'm just going to tell you.
That's hilarious.
It is so good. Okay.
All right. Well, if you love the Coach's Cup and our bunny trails as much as we do, and our song references and our practical tips, then
good stuff in here.
Share this podcast, folks. Share it with the people you love, the people you care about, the people you think who might enjoy listening to us drink coffee from cups with our faces on it. And we still want some reviews. Even if most of our mugs are gone or our drawing is over for now, we would love to have your review. Really.
No matter when you hear this, again, it does mean a lot, because we know we're reaching hundreds and hundreds of y'all, and it would be nice to touch base. If we've touched you, you come back and you can touch us with your words.
And it also helps move us up. It helps give us the opportunity to reach more people, because the more reviews we have, that kind of moves us up in the algorithm. So
Yeah. Math.
yeah, all that good stuff that I'm not even going to try to explain to you. We can talk about imposter syndrome all day, but nothing about algorithms.
No, it's optional, y'all.
All right. Until next week.
Yep.
If you're looking for a coach, you can find me at sonyagreencoaching.com, and I would be happy to. I've got some room for a couple more.
Yep. And if you wanted to work with me, I coach exclusively with the No BS weight loss program, and I coach more on I coach weight loss and more. Yes. And imposter syndrome and all the things.
Yes, because it's always all the things in our mind.
It's always your thoughts.
Always.
There you go.
Yeah. Surprise.
Yeah, bingo. There you go. There's your path to better life, but you got to know him. You got to have an editor.
That's right. All right. We'll see you next week, folks.
Bye.